Cities. Too Much, Too Fast? By Tammy Zambo. Population growth throughout history. Almost since the beginning of human existence, the number of people in the world has grown. One increase in population began about AD 900, when people began forming settlements that relied on raising crops and livestock rather than on hunting only. The world's population began to grow rapidly around AD 1700. One reason for this growth is that the plague had finally stopped being a major cause of death in Europe. This rapid population growth helped make the Industrial Revolution possible. The use of machine power eventually helped the world's population grow even more rapidly. The population of the world in 1700 was about 600 million people. In AD 500, the population of the world had been about 200 million people, and in AD 1000, there were about 300 million people in the world. Cities existed even in this relatively early period of human history. Ancient Rome had a population of 1 million residents around AD 175. The city of Thebes in ancient Egypt probably had 50,000 residents as early as 1300 BC. The population growth in Britain gained speed before 1750, when the Industrial Revolution began. By 1800, the world population was about 1 billion people. From about 1950 to the present, the population has skyrocketed. Today, about 6.4 billion people live on the planet, and the number is still climbing. Cities, cities, everywhere. During the Industrial Revolution, scientific advancements such as modern medicine and sanitation saved and extended people's lives. This meant that people had more children than before, and this is one change that boosted the rate of population growth. In addition, large numbers of people began moving from rural areas to cities to take jobs in the busy factories, causing the cities to grow rapidly. By 2001, there were nearly 20 megacities, or city regions with more than 10 million people. Although cities all over the world have grown rapidly in recent years, some cities declined in population. About 20 major cities in the United States, such as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Toledo, Ohio, have had declining populations. The population explosion. In recent decades, world growth has sometimes been called the population explosion because of the rising rate of growth. Another term that describes this situation is exponential growth. This type of growth begins slowly, but later picks up tremendous speed. What this situation means for the world's population is that it takes less and less time for the number of people in the world to double. The population doubled from 500 million to 1 billion people from 1500 to 1800, a period of 300 years. However, it only took about 130 years to double again to 2 billion people, and another 45 years to once more double to 4 billion people, which was the world population in the late 1970s. Growth in the developing world. The greatest changes in the world's population are taking place in developing countries. By about 2007, 1/2 of the world's population will live in cities. Almost all of this population growth will occur in developing countries. In developed countries, 75% of the population already lives in cities. Why cities grow? The population of cities is growing partly because more of their residents are being born than are dying. In addition, as cities spread out, they surround areas that were once considered rural. A third cause of growth is migration, or the movement of people. Scientists who study changes in population are called demographers. People move from rural to urban areas for a wide variety of reasons. Possibly the most common reason is that cities provide more economic opportunities for more people than rural areas. Today, cities often provide opportunities for better education and better health care opportunities. There are many reasons behind immigration. When immigrants arrive in a city, they typically settle into small communities within that city. After they have made a strong start, they send for family members from their home country to join them. This pattern is called chain immigration. Most of the immigration throughout United States history has been chain immigration. People are also motivated to migrate to cities by reasons that make it difficult to continue living in rural areas. Disappearing jobs are one important reason. Some farms in the United States are being taken over by large farming corporations or are sold and changed into housing developments. Other rural jobs in the United States, such as fishing, mining, oil production, and ranching, have also declined. Another important issue is called eco-migration, which means that environmental changes force people to move. The soil in some areas is no longer suitable for farming because wind and water have eroded it, or its nutrients have been lost. Other causes for eco-migration include catastrophic events such as floods, drought, mudslides, and hurricanes. Political unrest is yet another reason behind immigration. Wars and other conflicts in areas such as Europe, Africa, and the Middle East have uprooted hundreds of thousands of people. These people become refugees and must find new places to live. For many of them, cities are the places they choose. The spread of slums. Cities with rapid population growth face many problems, particularly in developing countries. One problem is overcrowding, which makes housing the most immediate problem. When a city grows very quickly, newcomers arrive faster than housing can be built. People who cannot find housing must make it themselves, from scraps of wood, cardboard, and metal. In many cities, shantytowns, or slums, filled with these makeshift shelters, extend for miles. In fact, many city dwellers in developing countries live in slums. Some slums take up enormous amounts of land. One slum area of Nairobi, Kenya, has 400,000 residents. Hundreds of thousands of people also live in slum districts of Calcutta, India, and Lagos, Nigeria. Slums lack services such as basic sanitation, clean water, and electricity. These conditions encourage the rapid spread of diseases such as cholera, dysentery, typhus, typhoid, and tuberculosis. Housing and basic services are not the only concerns in growing cities. Cities in developing countries often employ people in poorly built factories, which pollute the air. In addition, the streets are choked with cars and trucks, creating more air pollution. In Mexico City, Mexico, air pollution has reached such a high level that people are only allowed to drive their cars 6 days a week. Urban sprawl in the developed world. Growing cities in developed countries face challenges too, one of which is urban sprawl. Most cities spread outward as they grow, adding one suburb after another. Many people like to move to these suburbs because there is more room for a large house and lawn than in the cities. Suburbs, however, hold more than just houses. They also need public buildings such as schools, town halls, churches, office parks for work, and shopping facilities such as malls. They need roads to connect all of these buildings together and to connect each suburb to the heart of the city. In some parts of the world, suburbs spread out so far from the center of a city that they run into suburbs of other cities. The resulting chain of cities and their suburbs is called an urban corridor. One urban corridor in the United States extends from Washington, D.C. to Boston, Massachusetts, a distance of about 500 miles, or 800 kilometers. Ecological footprints. Urban sprawl takes an immense amount of space and uses important natural areas. In the United States, new suburbs cover thousands of square miles of land every year, land that was once rich farmland, dense forest, or precious wetland. Cities, however, actually use even more land than this. Beyond the suburb limits lies space used for waste disposal and natural resources such as water, wood, and petroleum. All of these things are necessary to support the people who live in a sprawling city. The combination of a city's surface area and the amount of land needed to supply enough natural resources for the population is called an ecological footprint. For example, the ecological footprint of New York City includes the reservoirs, or artificial lakes, northwest of the city that supply its drinking water. One of these reservoirs, the Cannonsville Reservoir, is more than 100 miles northwest of Manhattan. Ecological footprints are larger in developed countries than in developing ones, because people in developed nations consume more resources. Factories and automobiles in cities produce large amounts of carbon dioxide. Increasing the amount of this gas in the Earth's atmosphere may be related to global warming. A number of challenges. Still other problems challenge the cities of developed countries. Urban sprawl creates more traffic, which generates more air pollution and uses up more of the world's limited oil reserves. The world's supply of fresh water is decreasing, yet populations in growing cities demand more of it. In addition, as more of a city's money and attention are devoted to the building of suburbs, less money and attention are directed toward maintaining and repairing cities. Buildings, bridges, and roads begin to break down. The number of available jobs in the city decreases as businesses themselves begin moving to the suburbs, and unemployment increases. These problems only worsen the poverty of inner-city residents who cannot afford to move to the suburbs. The Easter Island example. What if populations overuse the land and natural resources that support them? One example is the people who lived on Easter Island in the Pacific Ocean. Today, this island is known for hundreds of enormous stone statues, some of which weigh 50 tons. Archaeologists have learned that a group of Polynesians arrived by sea and settled the island around AD 400. The land was fertile and covered by a forest. For about 700 years, the population remained low, and the society prospered. About 7,000 people lived on the island by 1600. As the population sharply rose, it used up the island's resources. The trees disappeared as the people built houses, canoes, and the beams they used to put the statues into place. The cleared land was used to grow crops, but without the trees to anchor it, the soil eroded and lost nutrients. As the people lost the ability to build fishing boats and to grow crops, their food supply decreased. Fresh water, too, was limited. Competition for the scarce resources grew fierce, and war broke out. In the 1860s, more than 1,400 of the people were taken to Peru as enslaved people. The enslaved people who returned to Easter Island brought disease with them. More than 1,000 other people then died of disease. By 1900, the peak population of 7,000 had plunged to 111. Addressing the problems. Many people have come up with ideas to solve some of the problems that come with population growth. For example, paper manufacturing companies in the United States do business with the logging industry, which cuts down the trees needed to make paper. In recent years, most paper companies have realized that the cutting down of trees can do a great deal of harm to the environment. Therefore, these paper companies are now part of programs for planting new trees to replace those that have been cut down. Similarly, most communities in the United States have a recycling program. These programs recycle newspapers, glass bottles, and tin cans. The recycling of newspapers means that new paper can be made from old paper instead of from fresh wood. Many city and other local governments in the United States make certain that at least some of the paper they purchase comes from recycling rather than from cutting fresh timber. In some parts of the United States, new businesses have been moving to small cities instead of large ones. This cuts down on problems such as overcrowding that are caused by the numbers of people in the largest cities. Developing smaller cities called micropolitan areas have other advantages too. Because these cities are closer to rural areas, they can revive rural economies through small-scale industries, including the processing and marketing of agricultural products. In addition, the governments of smaller cities can respond more quickly and effectively to the needs of their residents, especially the poor. It is easy to become discouraged by the environmental damage and other problems that rapid population growth causes. Many scientists, however, are confident that if we put ideas such as these into practice, and if we better conserve our resources, we can reduce the negative impact on our lives.